Welcome to Switching On Electrified Skills, the podcast that sparks your curiosity and ignites your passion for a career in electrification. I'm Deepak Farmer. Join me on this electrifying adventure where I connect you with industry leaders, visionary education providers, and pioneers driving the electric revolution. Discover the world of skills, jobs, and community, gaining actionable insights, inspiring stories, and the latest developments. Excited today to be joined by Bentley and colleagues from Bentley. We've got Dan Swindells and we've got Steve Collier. Welcome, Dan, Steve. Thank you for joining me today. It's going to be a really exciting, podcast, I hope, today, because we obviously are, talking to Bentley, to our audience. That's going to be a very well-known brand, luxury brand. But I think today will be really interesting because we're going to go into some of the nooks and crannies of the teams that are available there and the opportunities that are available for our audience and how they can engage with that. But firstly, I would like to welcome you, and if you want to tell us a little bit about your individual roles, if we start with yourself, Steve.
Yeah, sure. I'm Steve Collier. I work in the Academy, also known as the Centre of Excellence. It's come up to year 10 for me at Bentley, looking after technical training, predominantly quality, audit, safety related. So there are courses that are kind of mandatory. There are courses that Bentley require particularly engineers to undertake. And then there's always new stuff emerging and we're planning for. So broad and varied, my role.
Yeah, my name's Dan Swindells. I'm technical manager for electric vehicles within Vehicle Motion. So it's an R&D function in Bentley that looks after chassis and powertrain and ADAS components. Previously, so I've been with Bentley since 2016. I was the component owner for the electric motor on our plug-in hybrid vehicles that are in the market today. And then more recently, I've took up a role of kind of supporting with high voltage integration topics within chassis and powertrain. And supporting our colleagues in developing in the area of high voltage working.
Brilliant. So I think we'll start with a little bit about yourselves. Now, as you mentioned around, starting in 2016, but if we went a little bit further back, so we start with yourself, obviously, Dan, with regards to how you've ended up here. Obviously, you're working for Bentley. There's so much interesting things you're doing, but somewhere along the line, you would have made that decision to go into this field or something like that. A young Dan, teenage years, thinking, what am I going to do next? What did that journey for you look like?
Yeah, it was almost by accident. It's quite in that sense, it's maybe quite a good story. So I did automotive engineering BEng at John Moores in Liverpool, predominantly mechanically biased degree. I knew I wanted to be in the automotive industry, big petrol head from being young. And then I completed a sandwich year. So for 12 or just over 12 months between my second and third year, I took an industrial placement year and I worked for a company called Optera, a bus manufacturer. And this was at the time when there was an initiative being funded by the government called the Green Bus Scheme that basically supported the purchase of low carbon emission buses for city transport. And so Optera had got a contract to work for Manchester, GMPTE it was at the time, to develop a fleet of hybrid buses. So I was doing design engineer work at the time, but it kind of really got me involved with electrification in quite an early phase of electrification 15 years ago. And it became then something that I was really interested in, the combination of an electric powertrain with a diesel generator. It was in that application, and then when I finished university, I thought in my head electrification was the way forward, and I got a job at a test house in the northwest. It was called MI Technology at the time. Came out of Leyland Truck and Bus. Working on electric motors on test rigs, so doing PV and V development of those machines from anything from I was doing immersion tests for IP rating of motors to doing full performance benchmarking of machines as well. And that was what kind of perked my interest in electrification. It was really interesting work. It was new work. I was learning a lot of new skills, and it's just kind of followed me through then. And I was looking for a role kind of within the electrification space at an OEM, and the role came up at Bentley right at the start of their hybrid vehicle program, so right at the start of electrification, and I was successful. And yeah, I've been really lucky and fortunate. It's been a great role for me.
It sounds like you're really excited about it and still excited by it, which
Yeah.
is really good. And from yourself, Steve, in terms of your journey, how has that been for you, and why have you ended up here, right, in terms of the time that you've, spent in your career? Because your area obviously works in, you're talking about development and development of people, right? We went from technical to development. So how has that journey been for you?
Yeah, it's similar but different. So I've got an electrical background. I'd got my late father was a Rolls-Royce engineer, so I'd got a role model within the family. So I undertook a 3-year high voltage distribution apprenticeship. So I'm showing my age a little bit, but going back to public sector network suppliers. So you moved away, you lived away most of the time when you were training, which was exciting. This is at 16 to 19 years old. High voltage, lethal voltage, substations, feeders, faults in the community. So it was a broad and varied role. Did 12, 13 years with that particular energy supplier. And I think it was a recession start of the 1990s. As I would have kept studying, higher national certificate to go into what they called the engineering training scheme, it all kind of stopped because of a recession. So still ambitious, still trying to get a foot on the ladder. So my natural aptitude was towards learning and development and teaching. Kept studying, and career-wise worked nationally with the Electricity Association. And then here I am suddenly applying for a role at Bentley Motors, which was relatively local. Never thought I'd work at Bentley Motors. But what they knew that I really didn't was that there was a substantial high voltage vehicle training initiative required across the whole factory. So, of course, my background with electrical really helped with interview, and my learning and development specialism was what they would be looking for to develop and implement, the training across all different levels. So it's quite a fascinating journey, and it's 10 years with Bentley, so it's gone in the blink of an eye, really.
Wow, 10 years. So I guess, from a collective point of view, there's a reason why you're both here, right? Is that you are working very closely together. Now, from a technical point of view, because we talked about this before, and I'd love to know a little bit about why in an organization such as Bentley, it's so important to have that joined up approach from a technical point of view and a people development point of view. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and how you guys work together and the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, Bentley is a big company, but actually it's not a massive company when you consider kind of what we're talking about today. So high voltage work and high voltage training in particular. And so we've had to at the very start of kind of the hybrid vehicle program, we had kind of only a few people who had real high voltage experience, and Steve obviously was able to bring that from his background in power networks, and that's been a really interesting element because I guess the power industry is really well regulated, whereas in the UK in particular, in automotive, there's not as heavy kind of regulation around specifically working on high voltage vehicles. So from that element, we got really good technical aspect. The guys who are within engineering or manufacturing, hands-on working on the vehicles and understanding the systems and the architecture. And then kind of Steve's side of it from a training and development program of how to put together a suitable training program that covers all the bases and make sure that we've got competent, confident kind of colleagues at the end of that process.
I think that's really important because I say this often, but I think there's a huge link. There's an absolute link between innovation and the people who are doing that innovation, and the team that you have around you, and the skill sets you have in that team, because it can change the outcome of an innovation in various different forms. It's like a recipe. You have the right ingredients, right, and then depending on what ingredients you have, the quality of what comes out on the other side is so essential. From yourself, Steve, you're supporting people, in terms of their whether it's reskilling or development or staying up to date with the latest trends. How are you making sure that the teams that you're putting in place for Dan are the right teams with the right skill sets, and are able to support Dan's technical development in the right way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've brought with me from Power Networks a series of, we could call them authorization or competence levels and layers. We also have, of course, our Volkswagen Group elements that we kind of have to adhere to as well. So we've got a couple of masters, really, both technical experts within Bentley, and those people are heavily involved with vehicle projects with wider groups. So from day one, it's been utilising best practice to ensure that people are safe, they're assessed regularly, they're authorised to the appropriate level, and we control it quite closely. It's expensive, so you don't kind of train everybody. It's what the business requirement is. So there's a lot of back and forth, and ensuring that the quality or the rigour is built into those different layers of, you could call it competence or authorization. So we do a lot of work on that. There's regular meetings. There's introduction of trying to find technical deliverers is particularly challenging. And now, of course, as you get into the cycles of refresher training, you've got to ensure current competence. So again, that's something that we've inherited or brought with us perhaps from Power Networks. So you double the work in a lot of respects, because you've got new people to meet our vehicle project requirements, and then you've got the people who need to be brought up to date and refreshed and given new equipment, new technology briefings, and access to new vehicle architecture. So yeah, it's just one element of what I do. This is the other thing we all do at Bentley. We juggle multi-projects at once, so we don't just have that like luxury perhaps of automotive electrification. We're also then looking after a broader portfolio of responsibilities.
Of course, I think that's such an important part of how an engineering organization works, is to have that multidisciplinary approach and that sort of multiple roles where we play, because effectively we're trying to break new ground, right? You're trying to break new ground, as in, all the things that you're doing are very innovative, they're luxury, they're high end. So you don't always have a benchmark to measure it against. So you end up doing multiple roles. But over the years, from Bentley's perspective, how has Bentley, in its history and currently with the recent changes in electrification, how is Bentley as an organization adapting from where it was, say, in its history to where it is, moving towards in recent years? How is that changing over that period? And, from both your perspectives, really, because you've got the technical side, but then obviously the workforce and people side. So if we start with the technical side, how has that changed over the...
I think it's been discussed before, or maybe somebody else has made the analogy that there's been three eras of Bentley. So the company was founded in 1919, the traditional kind of Bentley Motors, big Le Mans winning Grand Tourers. And that era ran for a long time, and then the kind of the Volkswagen era, when we introduced GT, for example. GT and Flying Spur were a massive success story for us. Increased the volume massively of the vehicles that we made, but also kind of introduced a lot of new technology into the vehicles as well, and new eras of performance that we'd perhaps not seen before. And now kind of we're in the third stage now. So that last stage lasted, 20 odd years. And now we're in this stage of electrification. Now we've announced that we're going to introduce a fully electric lineup. And that's a really exciting place for the business to be. But also it's had to grow massively in order to support that as well. So it's nice to see even within the, not even 10 years that I've been there, the change in some of the initiatives and drives. Me and Steve work on projects at the moment where we're looking, outside the high voltage space, just into electrification itself, and how we support our colleagues transition from, ICE competencies, so internal combustion engine competencies that we've known for so long, into this completely new era. Not only just from the technical side of, what the components and what the systems are on the vehicle, but also from how we run projects now and how we have to run projects in a changing environment. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's really exciting because there is a lot of change. The company recognises that and it's supporting it as well. And there's a lot of new initiatives, and it's very supportive of the team that it has to build in order to deliver this new era for Bentley.
I think it's important that you say that, because we see a lot of times when we speak in business that it's a hardship around change, and nobody likes change, right? But there is a nature that there are people who like change. New things that are coming in, they're exciting. As engineers, I find it quite exciting when something new happens and you want to get into it. But not everybody's like that. And we have to remember that we're dealing with people, individuals who are, going through those emotions and that sort of change. Even though, as a business, we want to, move towards a different change, the people, bringing people along that journey, supporting them in their transition is a huge part of, especially Steve, the part that you're doing, supported by Dan. But how are people being managed in terms of supporting them in the change that happens in such an era? So, for example, going from ICE to EV, how do the emotions work there? How do people feel about that as a general consensus around you? And then what does Bentley do that other organizations can learn from in trying to support their workforces in moving on to a new era of Bentley, as you said?
There's been an awful lot of change in the years that I've been at Bentley. Particularly recently, we're having transformation initiatives. Recruitment is changing dramatically. We've got young, fresh thinking, looking at very different ways of recruitment, and they're really paying dividends. That the diversity, the females into engineering is a real hot topic now, and you see the advertising, the marketing expertise that's bringing that change with it. So there's subtle things. There's internal diversity groups that have been formed and are working particularly well, well accepted. No longer a kind of tough, no nonsense manufacturing environment. It's now a real roles for anybody. Anything that you fancy or you are interested in or drawn to, those roles exist at Bentley. So they're starting to exploit that. They're starting to, as I say, recruit and market in a different way. Oversubscribed, fantastic statistics of people wanting to work for Bentley. The quality is then really important to us, and that opens up then arguments of are the schools, are the colleges, are the universities building the quality into the current programs that Bentley can then polish, rather than Bentley not have the kind of quality of people that they're looking for. So yeah, I'd say that in the last few years, leadership and management is a huge topical area for Bentley. We spend substantial amounts of time, effort and energy on those areas. Traditional activities such as project management are still issues that Bentley are looking to improve. And then, as Dan was saying, the technical developments and changes now with artificial intelligence and virtual vehicle design, systems engineering. There's a whole host of subject areas that are very new and very different. So the traditional engineers are being given that opportunity to reskill, retrain, and be retained within Bentley. And so far, so good. It's a big message, and there's a lot of work going into that environment to modernise and to transform. Yeah.
So the way that I see that is that you talked about investment, you talked about support, from a Bentley's perspective, and generally speaking, whether you, it doesn't matter where you are, right, you're going to know Bentley, right, in some form or another. And it's always associated with the high end luxury, brand. It's got high tech stuff, and it's got a presence that is very clear. But you're also supported by an ecosystem around it. Ecosystem of supply chains, ecosystem of smaller SME businesses that might be there. In the entire ecosystem, as we do with manufacturing and lots of different forms of research and development as well. If you are going to put a message out there to those organizations and say, okay, look, this is Bentley, and you've just mentioned about we're doing diversity, inclusion, we're putting a long, important emphasis on this, creation of a workforce. They're also going to be feeling it. The only difference that they are going to feel, which is something that is an important part to highlight, is that they're not Bentley. Right, Bentley is naturally somebody that you're attracted to in comparison to a small SME. But we need the SMEs and supply chains to be able to support the bigger picture. So even though they're not directly working for Bentley, in a way, they're still supporting Bentley in their own right. What would you say are the messages that you would want to see, or would you want to see actions from SMEs and supply chains to try and replicate some of the success that you're having, right, with your workforce creations?
I think it's a really good point because everyone's Bentley is a big company. It's a big OEM within the UK, and like you say, it's got a global presence. It's globally kind of renowned. But particularly from an R&D perspective, we are quite a small engineering team. If you look at the diversity of kind of projects or topics within those projects that we need to deliver. So we're absolutely reliant on those suppliers to be able to complete our projects. We wouldn't be able to deliver vehicles on time and to the quality if we didn't have the support of those other organisations as well. And what I enjoy at Bentley is that when we do kind of work with those partners, we often find, and with some of the stuff that we've looked at recently, Steve, where we get really positive feedback from the suppliers because they feel like they're kind of part of the team. There's a real transparent process in terms of how we share information or how we have to kind of share the development activities maybe, and so I think they come along as for part of the ride, and that's what we have to have. It needs to be that kind of relationship, otherwise we're not able to kind of deliver what we need to.
Brilliant. Steve, from your point of view, in terms of, you mentioned about, the graduates or the training or the vocational, students or, skill sets that are coming through, and the need for wanting to polish them rather than recreate them. What do you see? Because that'll be the same for, Bentley, it'll be the same for, your ecosystem and your supply chains. And yes, you're right. It's a responsibility for education to provide, the right level of, students that you can work with, or, future employees. What's happening in that ecosystem to make sure that gap between someone leaving education and coming to Bentley or one of your supply organizations is being reduced, and you are polishing rather than recreating? Are you co-working with them? Are you, developing, education with them? Or is it still very much, like it was 5, 6 years ago, where, there's a big gap between what was happening at universities and education and, skills providers to what someone in industry would accept?
Yeah, I'd say there's a gap. And certainly with the transformation activities, we mentioned some like software-defined vehicles, virtual vehicle design, systems engineering. That they're pretty new topics, and that the delivery supply chains are not really out there. So Bentley outsources, so we don't have a fleet of trainers. So we are reliant on the supply chain, whether it's universities, whether it's private suppliers, regional, local, national, international. We look at them all. We use them all. So I'd say, it's tough. It's tough to get quality. There's a limit to how available the likes of Dan and his expert colleagues are to help shape and nurture the content or the requirement for some of those subject areas that I've mentioned. So that's a real issue. That universities, the content has got to be refreshed. It's got to be modernised. So when those graduates are applying to Bentley, they've got strong mechanical or electrical or electronic or automotive or software backgrounds, degrees, master's degrees. It's a big skill set. It's a big ask that we're looking for. So I'd say it's an issue, and the infrastructure. There's work we do collaboratively with other brands through the Auto Council, through their skills working group. There's elements of good practice, but to roll that out into a regional series of delivery solutions or national solutions is really difficult, because ultimately those colleges, those universities are businesses. They need throughput, they need a reassurance of a number of years of contracts or of students to go through these elements, and that's proving a real challenge, I'd say, for the business and maybe for the automotive sector, certainly.
I think you're probably right there, and I guess it's interesting to hear you say about software. I mean, software is becoming pretty much the whole value in a vehicle almost. But there are software. Traditionally, you're thinking about coding, you're thinking about building things in mechanical. But if you had the choice, and it might be both, right? That you've got somebody coming into your organization, you'd want to see them coming from a solid computer science background, right, which is focused on that element of developing software, embedding software, and all that sort of stuff, or you look at somebody who's come through the traditional engineering route, who has some experience, or I say a module that was delivered to them in software, but they're not going to be at the level of a computer scientist who's doing it day in, day out. That's different. Where would you see this kind of skill sets you're looking for as an organization to be coming from? Would you rather it be somebody from an engineering background who has learned software, right, to a degree, or somebody who's got a solid background in software engineering or software design and development?
So it's all of the above. My colleagues in the early careers team have dramatically changed the content of what our higher apprentices and our graduates study, and the digital element of that has changed considerably over the last few years. So again, the business is responding to the business need, and again, ideally, you'd probably think that people may need 2 degrees, so they do one before they join Bentley, and they do development with us in the right subject areas that give us the skills that the vehicle projects would need. So it's I don't know about complicated, but there's an awful lot that Dan and his colleagues need to know nowadays. It really has moved on.
So, I mean, if in an ideal, if you had a message out to, say, higher education or even training providers, non-traditional, whatever it might be, to relook at their curriculums, right, in terms of what that looks like, and to get you the right person. So you're only just adding the top layer rather than trying to reinvent the entire person. What would that be? So, for me, from what you've said, you're probably going down the lines that if I have an engineering degree, right, which is 3 years long, I'd want half of it at least, right, to be focused almost like a merger between computer science, right, and engineering, as opposed to one or the other. And at the moment, it's quite clear that many of the organizations that are delivering these programs have 2 verticals as opposed to a horizontal offering, right? What would you see? What would the message be to them?
You said it at the start where you said traditional mechanical or engineering background where you or degree, higher education where you've got a module focused on computer science. And as Steve said now, and from a technical perspective, how we're having to, the way our projects are delivered now are changing so much, and a majority of that is based on software and software delivery. if you look at how you design a vehicle or how you engineer a vehicle now, and you're looking at kind of top level attributes from a systems engineering point of view and how they cascade then and are supported along the way by the software integration, software development. Even people who are, designing mechanical components now still have to have that awareness and understanding of the software process and how that builds the timeline for a vehicle project. So I think it's a really good point, and I think you're right. We're at the point now where we have to educate our kind of new engineers kind of more broadly in those areas, so they've got fundamental understanding. Computer modules or kind of computer science modules. Where when I was at school, when I was in education, AND gates and things like it's not really suitable now in this new modern age. Yeah, absolutely. The core engineering knowledge is still required, but you have to integrate that now with the kind of the software defined vehicle, or how we manage a project based on software delivery and software development.
That's really. I mean, we talk about software. We talked about this off camera, but about the way technology is being used in education. And you mentioned that obviously, if you could, you'd have many of Dan, right? Supporting in various forms of education. But we talked about virtual delivery. We've talked about AI, and in the context of education and training and development, Steve, right? How do you see the application of that? And are you moving towards that already, right? In terms of applying that in a future way of delivering education or training or development?
So yeah, I mentioned earlier about assessment and refresher training. There's great opportunities for virtual assessment using the virtual reality, using the augmented reality. We spoke, didn't we, about a German trainer logging on with a student doing a refresher in Bentley in an office, and they would be able to, they'd have access to a vehicle. They would go through a test procedure, which is the refresher safety requirement that we're looking for, that people are still following procedure and are dead safe. And that could all be done virtually. It's a little bit of a step into the unknown, but the technology definitely exists. Bentley digitizes its vehicles. That might be sensitive. Would they release that kind of information for learning and development points? But it's frightfully expensive. So if you have collaboration with other brands, where then the risk is it could become generic, whereas Bentley would want certain specific procedures to be utilised. So it's not straightforward. We've had our eye on this for a number of years, but again, budgets are tight, markets are difficult at times, and so of course it's not easy to unlock that kind of funding. So yeah, how we get an answer to that, I don't know, but certainly those platforms are just waiting to be utilised, I would suggest. And that's just for refresher training. We haven't mentioned people just starting out, or people reskilling, utilising those technologies. The world's our oyster, I think. It's quite exciting, but yeah, it's taking a while to unearth and to find those opportunities.
And as part of that, I guess it goes hand in hand with things that are emerging, right? New directions that we are moving in, because generally what we tend to do is, and many see electrification as an overarching umbrella term, right? But there are lots and lots of areas of specialist skills. We've tried to catalogue that as you're aware, on the ERS hub, as part of the power electronics, drives and machines, body of knowledge, and some of the work we're doing in the electrification skills network to try to catalogue battery technology and some of those skills. What are the emerging things that you're seeing more in the new, in sort of the more narrower verticals of electrification as opposed to electrification itself? What things are you seeing that are emerging that you think universities, colleges, people, training providers need to be building provisions for, to support organisations such as Bentley?
It's an interesting point because, like you said, when you consider electrification or the broad term of electrification, I'm from a chassis and powertrain background, and you just said with the ERS hub, you're focusing on high voltage batteries, drives, and motors, that type of thing. Where actually, the electrification era has brought massive change completely to the vehicle, not just from the powertrain and the kind of that side of things. The user experience now is massive, and we consider the user experience from everything from not just how you interact with the dashboard, say, or some of the infotainment functions within the vehicle, but how the chassis and powertrain then respond to your mood or your interaction with the vehicle, or your driving style. So it's taken it's adding a new element, and I don't really know how you would describe that element, but it's not focused solely on the engineering side of it like, that what it has done traditionally. There's an emotion side of it now that the development of electrification and all of the good stuff that it brings with it in terms of the user experience can build on to make that user experience so much more emotive. That's what I think customers are looking for now. If you look at a lot of technology that exists in cars today is quite gimmicky, but it sells the cars and it's what people are looking for and it's what excites people, and that's outside of the traditional engineering functions that you would associate with car manufacturing.
It's that UX experience, right? I've seen it over and over again. The decision between which car I'm going to go for, right, and which one can come down to that emotion, that feeling, that smell, that hit, that noise, right? Is so much to it that you try to support. And I guess, in a way, that people that can understand the UX design of it or the user experience design of it are a fundamental part of, the workforce that you need. And, as we move along this journey, the workforce that you currently have, do you see that then changing in terms of as you've mentioned, you've got the engineering element of it, but now we're not only talking about engineering with software, we're kind of talking about engineering software and the people aspect of it and the UX design of it, or are they separate roles? Do you feel, or are they a bit of all of it?
I think there's a bit of all of it, and it has to be like that because you can't work those elements in isolation because then they don't come together. So you've got to have people that can mix across all of those areas in order to make sure that it comes together. And that's when I was saying before about how Bentley and other manufacturers as well will be the same. How they're having to change the way that they manage projects, what the timeline looks like, or what are the key points within a project. It has to change in order to let all those bits intertwine and come up with this end product that then encompasses all those different elements.
And from that perspective, Steve, we've got people out there, right? In the ecosystem, and this is effectively what the hub is there for. What the government's trying to push is about making people realize the opportunities that are available in these spaces, but also making sure that they obtain the right skills and the right, sort of portfolio of work that can be quite attractive to, someone like Bentley who's recruiting and trying to get people in. And you talked about diversity and you've talked about, all the work that you're doing. And I guess, this is a two-pronged approach in terms of people wanting to join and then, an organization putting the ropes out, say, grab that and come along. We're doing what we can to try to support people into this. But still, we are seeing that people aren't getting those messages that, what there's a great career here. There is lots of exciting opportunities. There's excitement, there's adventure, there's creativity, there's that aspect of everything that fulfills somebody in terms of a career. What would you say, from your perspective, we need to do more of? And I guess on the flip side of that, what message would you like to give the audience, people who are listening to this, in how they engage with that? How did they find their route to Bentley and electrification and all the different amazing jobs that there are here?
Yeah, I was at a FE college in Cheshire a week ago with another Dan, a senior software manager at Bentley, and he used the term, you've got to work hard. It's not on a plate for you. So it's the usual things, the fundamentals that whether it's at school or college, it's working hard at studies, it's having extracurricular hobbies, interests that will then fit into one of these areas that we've talked about today. And again, you can be a solicitor, a lawyer at Bentley, you can work in occupational health, you can be a fitter, you can be a sales and marketing expert, you can be all sorts of different engineering layers or roles. So there is something for everybody. So it's back to that pedigree, that desire, that enthusiasm, and a skill set that will interest the potential employer. It's probably not changed over decades, but more so now is polished, shining through, having that desire, that curious mind to explore a career. And one thing about Bentley, people often stay there for significant periods of time. They really do move and shake their roles from what they would start as. There'll be something completely different 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. So you can grow with the business as well. So, the colleges, the universities, they need to have their ear to the ground. They need to be hearing these technical areas that Bentley is moving into. The secret stuff that we can't talk about today, the tech that's going to require within a Bentley is unbelievable. So when we're talking about software, that there's reasons why we keep emphasizing those skill sets. So it's it's a great opportunity. It's a once in a, not even a lifetime. It's probably once in the whole of Bentley's existence. This transformation that we're going through, and the opportunities are better than ever, I would say.
So it sounds like to me, to summarize, we've got, open doors, right? We've got amazing career prospects, right? We've got a emphasis on inclusion and diversity, right? We've got the right, direction of travel in terms of, look, we're here. You said it yourself, something for everyone, right? Whether you want to be in marketing or you want to be in sales, there's an opportunity at Bentley for you, right? And I assume I can pretty much say that if it's there at Bentley, it's going to be there at the supply chains, right? And that ecosystem, and that there isn't just a limited amount of jobs here, that actually, as the business grows, opportunities continue to grow. And as opportunities grow, you can pivot internally, right, to do different things, that things you might like, things you might not like. And Bentley's really supporting that whole idea of, really building a career that people want, right? And, and at the same time, making sure that the business needs are being met. And I guess if I leave it on a final note from both of you, in terms of what you would like to see happening over the next few years, where would be your absolute sort of, that's where that issue lies now? And if I can see that issue, fixing, as you might have mentioned around, the disparity between, universities and colleges and, and organizations, where would you see your most focus being pushed to try to make an ecosystem where skills are available, the right people are available, but they're happy people, they're prosperous, they're enjoying working for, as you are, being part of Bentley and its organizations? What would you see that as in the future?
For me, it's the gaps in the delivery. So universities with the students we've talked about, but there's an awful lot of people at the technician level. There's an awful lot of people at the operative fitter level. We cater for all of those layers. It's people identifying. Maybe it's a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit needed to come to the OEMs, to the manufacturers, to say, we've listened about software-defined vehicles, virtual vehicle design. We have put together a 3-tier solution that we believe would satisfy your requirements for most people at the base level, a further number of specialists at the mid-level, and small numbers of specialists at the top level, rather than us have to try and nurture and shape that. Wouldn't it be great if the supply chain, this is on maybe the universities or the delivery side, would be anticipating that and offering those solutions that we would snap their hand off for. So that's certainly a gap for me. We do a lot of work trying to shape the solution, but it's not efficient, and we probably don't have the volumes for them to sometimes take that really seriously. If it came the other way, and people may be taking some risk, or that entrepreneurial spirit, as I say, that would be really helpful for me.
That's a really good point. I think it's a great little message out there that says, yes, we can come to you, but there's only so many of us. Your bread and butter is making sure that education is provided at the right level, right, and therefore take that proactive approach, right. I think it's a great message, Brad. And yourself, Dan?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what Steve said, and Bentley recognises and encourages innovation, and it encourages innovation from within, as we've talked about, and Steve's mentioned. There's plenty of scope to be innovative and kind of build your role, or change your kind of career path within the company based on your interests and kind of evolving skill sets. And I think that's what we need from external as well, is that innovation, because like I keep saying, we are quite a small team, and as Steve said, we can't always dedicate the right resource, and there's a lot of questions that we need answering that we struggle to answer ourselves as well, and we need the support from external kind of external companies or suppliers in order to answer those questions for us, or help us to answer those questions. And I think if that's the innovative side of it, isn't it? The innovative side of it, where we get a collaborative effort to answer the questions that we don't know how to answer, based on experience that other people have, or based on experience that some of our colleagues have as well, and add all them together to get the answers.
Excellent. It's been really enjoyable having you two here today and getting that perspective, and thank you firstly for, supporting, us and, and the work that we're trying to do in trying to build the right workforces for organisations such as yourself, but also on behalf of the people, giving them clarity, in how they can develop and, take the steps in joining great organisations such as yourself. And it's been a great podcast today. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to continuing to work with you on, some of the work that we've been doing as a hub and also as a university, and we'll keep progressing. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this electrifying episode of Switching On Electrified Skills podcast. Together, we'll shape a future that is powered by electricity. If you would like to learn more about electrification and explore courses and jobs, please visit ershub.co.uk or connect with us via social media channels. Thank you once again for joining me today. Until next time, keep charging ahead and unleash the full potential of your electrifying skills.